Outspoken with Bruce and Gaydos bring you a special conversation focusing on youth mental health and preventing more youth violence. A KTAR News Special, Youth on Edge, on 92.3 FM and the KTAR News app.
Welcome, everybody, to the 5 o'clock hour. For the next hour, Youth on Edge. We're going to examine mental health and behavioral issues among our teens. We are going to talk about social media, the smartphone. We're going to try and figure out, are we diagnosing our children quickly enough? We're going to discuss what has had a larger impact on youth mental health, the smartphone creation or the COVID pandemic. We're going to go through a lot of things. And in our first segment, we're going to start with teen violence and bullying, and we hope that you stay the hour, and our hope is that we can help you learn something possibly about your children. So without further ado, Bruce, let's let everybody know who our panel is. We think we got a great panel here today.
Yeah, we've put together a group of people that bring a variety of expertise from different backgrounds, and I think that's going to be really helpful to learning in here. First is Katey McPherson, a youth mental health advocate. It's great to see Katey back with us again. Thank you so much. A gentleman you heard with us on more than one occasion, and you certainly have a phenomenal relationship with, and it's so exciting to meet Coach Hosea Graham, Preston Lord's basketball coach over at Combs High School. And also a friend of ours. She's the executive director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Kristina Sabetta. Thank you guys all for being here today. We really appreciate it. All right.
Coach, why don't we start with you? As we said, our first segment is going to be teen violence and bullying. And, you know, you've done such an incredible job getting the basketball team, I guess, pointed in the right direction. Their friend was murdered. How in the world did you get that team through the days of Preston Lord? What were the discussions like? Because you were the right person at the right time for these kids. And I saw it with my own eyes how you got through to them.
Gaydos, thanks. Before I go down that road,
Please.
I just want to make sure that our population, our community, our state understands the gift that KTR is offering us, offering the parents, offering society about this evolution that's happening with our teenagers right now. And for you guys to be presenting this gift, opportunity for parents to listen in and understand and get educated on how to understand their teenagers, which has been a big challenge from the beginning of time, and we all know that, right?
Tougher now, isn't it?
Feels like it's getting harder.
Yeah.
It's getting difficult, and there's a lot of layers and ways to navigate through it, but it has to be a priority. And I think you're spearheading a movement.
Well, thank you.
And you get to say, in a year, 2 years from now, you started it, because I believe it's going to happen. I believe that parents need it to happen, and they're going to be the ones who take the baton and take it and run to the next lane. So how did we get it going? I think number one reason that I was successful with my team was because I was there with them from the beginning. We shared tears. We shared our pain. We shared the shock, the anger, and they saw me vulnerable. Me being vulnerable allowed them to trust me, knowing that, hey, he understands how I feel right now. He understands what I'm going through because he's going through it with us. And then we got together and started talking, right, opening up. They have to trust you to open up. And when they do, be prepared. Be prepared to hear things that you never imagined a teenager to be feeling, to have that going around in their hearts. And as we started focusing in on that, I wanted them to understand that to move away from that anger and that pain, let's not focus on how Preston died. Let's focus on how he lived. And what we can do, right, to keep that spirit moving, because this kid was so special. I mean, he's the kind of kid that when he smiled at you, you look in his eyes and you saw his heart. It wasn't just a grin. It wasn't just a smirk. it was a genuine smile, and it made you feel good.
Yeah.
And the things that I think that he had to offer this world, right, was snuffed out because he was, and I get to say it now, not, he was murdered.
Right.
Right. And, you know, when I think about it, how I get angry inside, but through the last 90 days, I've allowed that darkness not to consume me.
Yeah.
Because that's the wrong path to take, right? That will do nothing for anyone for us to get caught up into that darkness. More so to get to that light. The conversations that we started having as a team, our focus, our goals, the spirit of Preston, what he would want us to do. What would he want us to do, right? And making that safe environment for them to be able to be themselves, to experience their grief in a safe environment and not feel like they're being looked down upon.
Yeah, and judged. Right.
You had strategies ready to go.
I did.
Yeah.
I did through a lot of research,
Right.
and twice as much more prayer.
Yeah.
It was all prayer. I'm a witness that prayer is powerful.
Yeah.
I even went to Bloom 365, the lady had on today. I went down and I grabbed a bunch of her tools of how to manage depression and how to manage kids and where they were at their stage of grief.
And there are strategies out there for dealing with teen violence, for dealing with anxiety, for dealing with depression, for dealing with bullying. Kristina, how do you do this? I mean, how do you sit a kid down and go through some of this stuff, and what are some of the strategies for dealing with this type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, good question. One, we have to have those upward conversations about them, right? Let them know that we see them, we hear them, we know that they're dealing with something, right? Also letting them know that it's okay not to be okay today, right? Like, that's okay. I am a survivor of bulimia. I lived with depression and anxiety most of my life. And what I needed back in my young years is I needed a coach to come up and say, it's okay if you're not on your A game today.
Yep.
Right? I needed a parent to come and say, it's all right if you're not feeling well today, right? You can use mental health day too. Yep. That's okay, right? And so having those conversations, but also, you know, dealing with talking to the victims of the bullies, but also the bullies themselves, and find out what else is going on. It's not a matter of what's happened to them today, or what's wrong with them today, but what's happened to them to get to that point, right? Everyone has a story. And so when we start peeling that onion and we look at what that story is, it gives us a much better idea of what we're dealing with and what that young person is dealing with, which I think can be really difficult. And Katey, I'm sure you have something to add to this.
Yeah,
well,
Katey,
I was thinking along those lines, Katey, that, we think of bullying in this day and age. Did the internet, cell phones, social media, did it turbocharge bullying? Is it worse today? It's my impression, but I don't know if there's anything behind that.
It is worse today. It's an accelerant. It definitely served as an accelerant for the boys in Gilbert and Queen Creek as well to continue their violence and have an audience for it. There were a bunch of bystanders recording, which also accelerated the bullying. So yeah, it's definitely an accelerant. It's 24/7. They're getting crushed in person and then online.
Yeah, and we're going to go over, kids are saying they're on their cell phone or their smartphone for 4 or 5 hours, and we know that that's probably doubled.
I was going to say,
And
that's the low end, right?
That is creating this too.
The stat is shocking. The leading cause of death for kids between the ages of 10 and 14 is suicide. It didn't used to be like that. It did not used to be like that. This is approaching epidemic at this point.
Yeah. The other day, Coach, when you dropped off Preston Lord's jersey for me, so honored that you would do that. I didn't know this, but you shared with me in the office about your son and suicide. I can't tell you how sorry I am to hear it. I didn't know that. We shared a moment in the office about it, and I think that you possibly could help some parents out there. What happened?
So I think about my son Rocky, who was a budding basketball star, and we had a great relationship. The family had a great relationship. No idea
Yeah.
What was going on in his mind? No idea that he felt so unworthy, so disconnected because he had a different face on most of the time, and we couldn't see through it. And we sat and shared meals, and we talked about all kinds of things in life. And one night, I hear a knock at the door, right? I'll never forget it. I relive it all the time. And like my grandmother says, baby, nothing good ever happens after midnight.
Yeah.
Be home. Go home. 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a police officer saying your son's been in an accident. Please come with us to the hospital. I find out that my son committed suicide. No idea.
Yeah.
No signs. Wow. It was devastating. I went into a world of darkness for maybe a couple years.
Yeah.
And my wife got me right into counseling because she saw me circling the drain. And we know that 86% of marriages end in divorce when a child commits suicide. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Didn't know that.
But that jumped out at me, and I already had 2 other kids, and I loved them dearly as well, and I was not going to let that happen. Parents, there could be signs. There could not be signs. It's devastating. My message to you is this, right? Love them unconditionally. It doesn't matter what they've done, what mistakes they've made. Be passionate about when you tell them you love them. Look them in the eyes and say, I love you, not in passing. And when they want to talk to you, listen. Don't be unattentive to them. And when they tell you they love you, embrace those moments. Because, again, no one is guaranteed that time with each other. And you really have to cherish that time. Your children are so precious to you.
Coach, thank you for sharing that story. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Katey, I know that, and Coach kind of mentioned no real signs. I'm guessing there's a lot of parents out there that were like, well, what am I supposed to be looking for? Please help me. What are the signs? And again, I think 10 to 14 years old.
Wow.
When you think about that, I think about how does a child become that despondent?
Yeah. It's complex, and it's never just one thing, but drastic changes in behavior, which is really tricky. I have 4 teenage girls. They're all in high school. Emotions are high every day. Someone's crying in the morning. Someone's crying at night. If they're not crying, I'm like, what's wrong with you? So really honing in, and one of the things that I think is super important is put your phone down. Pay attention to your children.
Interesting.
We nag them all the time, get off your phone. We are constantly on our phones, and we're not paying attention to those little signs. But really honing in on frequent uptick in negative self-talk, isolation, withdrawal, or like somebody who's super withdrawn doing the exact opposite. Kind of, you talk to people all the time, they're like, he was so happy that day. When someone's made that decision, they come to a sense of peace. And so we're always constantly looking at who's in the lane of well-being, who's got a little bit of distress. Are they bouncing back to well-being? Are we sitting in distress for more than 2 weeks? When that's persistent, you want to get in front of that as soon as possible.
Kristina, when you and your organization deal with someone who might want to have these thoughts of suicide, what's the first step? What happens?
Sometimes it's just finding them a way to get up the next day and live each day at a time, right? Letting them know it's okay if we're not feeling the greatest today. Letting them know that tomorrow's going to get better. When they're in their darkest place, it's really hard to get out of it, right? It's really, really hard. And I think, Coach, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I think of, I just have to say, when I hear the word committed suicide and I think of your son, I think of, he died by suicide, right? He didn't want to leave. No. He died by suicide. Absolutely. And that's what we need to understand is that suicide is killing our loved ones, right? You shouldn't have to bury your son. This isn't okay. This is a public health crisis. This is important for us to think about. And so I think, a lot of times it's just giving folks the hope and the encouragement, sharing my personal experience on how we can continue to fight. and letting them know that treatment for some mental illnesses like depression are as high as 90%, right? So if we can give folks treatment, if we can identify what those signs are and get them connected sooner rather than later, we can avoid some additional suicides. Some are not preventable, and some we don't see the signs, but some are definitely preventable.
Wow. And again, I think of you losing your 17-year-old son, and I can't imagine it. And I can't imagine a 10-year-old getting to that point. It just sounds so bizarre to say that out loud, doesn't it?
It does.
It really does. Tell you what, we want to talk a little bit more, and we've really talked about some of the issues. Call it coping and resources. And I have a question for the panel. What do you think has been more harmful to our children? Is it cell phones, or did the pandemic set them back?
One of the things we left you all with was a question. Katie, let me start with you. So, which has had a larger impact on youth mental health? The creation of the smartphone or the COVID pandemic?
All of it.
All the above.
I mean, and it really, I do a lot of work with smartphones and social media impact. And so it really depends on the structure around the student, what protective factors they have in place, what support they have in place. I have 4 kids. One of them could care less about social media. The other one, she's on it all the time, right? So I really think it depends on the coping skills of the kids, the structure in the family, and the protective factors like trusted adults around them.
Do you restrict them from their phones, or do you give them only certain times to go on social media?
All of the things, yep.
All of those things?
All those things, yep. Central charging station, parent app, surveilling, monitoring, watching behavior, all the things.
Can I follow up with that? Do you think there's an age that is appropriate or not appropriate for a child? Is there an age that you think they should get a phone? Is there an age they should be allowed to use some of these apps?
Well, my bold answer you're probably not going to like, and I get this question all the time, is when should I give my kid a smartphone? And the answer is when you're ready for them to see pornography.
Wow.
So the age would be like 30, 35, 40.
Yeah, when they've moved out of the house.
We have all of the research, CDC, Surgeon General, Academy of Pediatrics, that says this is not good for kids. And so the Surgeon General says 16. I say you have to know your kid. Every kid's wired differently. We know that they cannot handle this medium.
Wow. It's shocking.
There was a study that like the top 10 websites in the world are pornography.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. And Snapchat, which is what all of these boys and goons were using to trade these videos, has porn baked into it. Like the front page of Snapchat has Pornhub.com takes you straight to porn.
Gosh.
Right.
Most parents don't know that.
Kristina, tell us about how busy NAMI was, let's say, during the pandemic. Because we're trying to figure out what was worse. Was it the COVID pandemic for kids? Was it the cell phone use that started, in 2014?
Yeah.
I would say that the cell phones, I think, has been worse for the kids. COVID has been worse for our mental health system in general. I mean, we had a crisis going into COVID. We lack workforce. We can get folks into the workforce, but we can't keep folks into the workforce. We're losing folks from mental health into Amazon and Starbucks every day. Why? Because they pay a lot more than we do in the mental health field. And so COVID really put a damper on the mental health system. I think the on the positive side of it, right, we have youth who are talking about it a lot more. Are recognizing some of these signs a lot more. We go into the classrooms and we'll do presentations with our Ending the Silence program, and we'll have students come up to us afterwards and say, please bring this home to my parents, right? I'm talking about it with my peers. My peers know what I'm struggling with. My parents don't know how to help me. Can you bring that home to them?
Wow.
So I think, sort of going back to your question, I think cell phones has been, of course, a huge damage for our youth, but COVID has been a huge damage for our mental health system. And so now as those youth are trying to find the help that they need, they can't get it.
Coach, what are you seeing? You're seeing a new class of kids come in all the time. I'm also curious as to if you've seen a change in the student, the athletes, the kids that have been coming through in your 20 plus years of coaching. Have the kids changed too?
Oh man, I'll tell you what, it takes a lot for coaches to keep up with them, with the type of kids. But the one thing that doesn't change is that every kid wants to belong. Every kid wants to be coached in a positive environment, and every kid wants to be patted on the back for the things that they do well. And if you take that structure and create that environment, you can keep them focused, and good things can happen. I think about the COVID and the iPhone thing, the smartphone thing. I think that COVID gave them an opportunity to get really good at using their iPhones because they couldn't go out. The socializing was limited. So they got so good on their smartphones that us parents, right, we're still trying to catch up. And these kids are so good at getting that smartphone and using it and socializing and communicating with each other. What should a parent do? I think you said a couple of really nice things, a central locating station to sew them up. But if you are going to take time away from them on their phone, you have to replace it with a productive and a positive activity that either involves friends or family that they can't do with their cell phone. When I have practices, nobody brings a cell phone into practice.
I wouldn't dare, Coach.
They know, yeah.
You know that, like in the NFL, they give their players, coaches give their players a social media timeout during practice. A lot of them do it.
Yeah.
Literally. And they say because you have the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And so it's even traveling into the 20s and 30s and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. We don't allow them into practice. And again, so now parents appreciate that because that's 2 hours that they're not on that cell phone.
Yeah.
Right.
Just an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
An amazing conversation we're having. Youth on Edge. Hopefully you're learning along with us, by the way. So glad to have Katey McPherson, Coach Graham, and Kristina Sabetta in here with us. Tell you what we're going to do on this side. We've talked a little bit, and I have a question. And again, my panel is much more versed in this than I am. We've talked a little bit about the stigma. And there is a stigma that comes along with mental illness. There is a stigma that comes along with anxiety, depression. Is the stigma bigger with the parents or is it bigger with the kids? Is this new generation, dare I say, a little more open to talking about it? And how do parents have to react to that? I left it with the panel with a bit of a question regarding the stigma of mental health, the stigma of raising your hand and saying, I need help. And I get a sense, it's more anecdotal, you guys are more experts at it than I am, that there is a generational divide. And I'm hoping that the younger generation is feeling a little more comfortable talking about mental health just as much as they would about their physical health, for example. Are we seeing that?
Yeah, we've been seeing that for a while. I would say the kids that just left college have done a great job of destigmatizing mental health help seeking. So if we lower the stigma, more people are going to come forward. Sure. So we have older adults saying, what is wrong with these kids? Why are they so weak? Why are they coming forward? We've been telling people for 50, 60 years, if you're not okay, come. And we have some adults, some schools that are like, whoa. We don't have the resources for you. We've got one guidance counselor to 900 kids. So if we are going to continue to send the message, you can come to us. We are trusted adults. We will help you. Then even if your school doesn't have resources, even if your family doesn't have resources, you are a bridge to finding those resources for those kiddos.
We talk about resources, and I think of NAMI as a clearinghouse of resources. Can you talk about that, Kristina?
Yeah, absolutely. So NAMI offers support group and educational courses free at no cost. We offer programs within the middle school and high schools, as well as to our educators and to our parents. And so we, as long as we have some volunteers, we are ready and willing to come in and bring those support groups. You know, when folks call us, a lot of folks are calling us because they're in crisis, right? And so we know the reality of our system is we know they're not going to go see a therapist tomorrow. They're not going to go see a psychiatrist Friday, right? They need immediate support. And so we can definitely provide that for them. They can also call our office and we can help get them connected to resources as well.
Coach?
Yeah.
The stigma.
Here's what I have to say about that. In the arena of athletics, I am so proud, and I will shout it from the mountaintops, of the young professional athletes, men and women, that are stepping up to the plate and saying, I have a mental health problem. I get depressed. those are my role models. Those are the role models that we need our young athletes to look up to and model and say, wow, I had you up here and you're just like me. I'm having issues. So it's okay for me, a high school student, a junior high student, to say, man, I'm struggling with depression or not being accepted as who I am. Those are the guys I just admire tremendously for stepping up and saying, hey, I need some help here.
Yeah.
You know, I can't continue going down this road because I have a passion for this game and I have to put aside what people think about me because of what way I'm feeling right now. I want help.
Well, this is the reality, right, of kids today, our celebrity culture, if you will.
Yeah.
They're looking up to these, whether it's athletes or I know some people in Hollywood or the music industry coming out and having those conversations and how much that means to these kids.
Yeah, because they can relate with them. They love their music. They love the way that they play on the basketball court. They love the way they hit the ball on the baseball field. And you look up to people like that, and you're like, wait a second, does that person have the same thing going on inside of them as I do? Well, I'm not all by myself anymore. And that's what helps get rid of, you know, the stigma. When Bruce and I came to speak at NAMI, you know, Bruce, you talked about depression. I talked about my anxiety. I hid it for years. Why? Because I thought someone would fire me. And I know that that's not the case anymore. And so I think if we can show our kids, hey, you know what? Everybody has this. Everybody's got it. Not everybody, you know what I mean. Yeah. A lot of people have this issue.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
You are not alone. You are probably in the majority.
Yeah. Right. And that's something that I know that especially NAMI and I know that you guys share is letting these kids know, because when you're in the midst of it, I can speak from personal experience. When you're in the midst of it, you feel very alone and you feel like you're the only person who feels this way.
You feel like you're drowning.
You're the only person that's ever felt like this in human history. You're unique in that sense. And the reality is it's a lot more typical than you might think. I really appreciate the time you guys have spent with us today.
Oh, gosh.
Sincerely appreciate it. And I know NAMI.org is a great place to go and learn more, Kristina. And I know that you guys, again, have resources there, links. You can find all kinds of things. Katey, every time you come in, we learn something new from you. Really appreciate it. You do such an amazing work.
Can I shout out a couple of resources?
Yeah,
please.
Notmykid.org is amazing. Kid in the Corner, amazing. Community Bridges, awesome. We have a Hope Institute in Chandler Unified School District. So many resources.
They're there.
You're not alone.
Parents,
you're not alone.
There are people to help. And Coach, you've been through a lot. And you continue to help and you continue to support and you continue to be a beacon of light. And we're so appreciative that you could be with us today, Coach Graham.
It won't stop.
Yes, sir.
And I'm so honored to sit between these two powerhouse ladies, man, who are reaching out and just being part of our world.
Hear, hear. Youth on Edge series will continue all this week, but boy, what a great time we've had in the sense of I think we've really learned a lot and had some great discussions.
Thanks for watching Outspoken with Bruce and Gaydos. Tap to watch more from KTAR News and click the button in the middle to subscribe.